Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother, asarimhotep, with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. And today we have a very special guest, Dr. Dennis Ausar Winkler. And we're going to talk about a variety of things, but our primary focus tonight is on this new wave of Black identity politics and labeling and the like. Uh, we're going to interject some psychological perspectives on this matter. And so, y'all know we've been discussing for quite a while um, the ADOS and FBA movement. And so, we want to expand the discourse with a very knowledgeable brother that I've had the opportunity to listen to over the past few weeks on this subject and wanted to have him on the platform. And I know it's been a while since I've done a show, so, trying to get back into the groove of things. But as usual, all that and more when we return in just a moment. And we are back. And so I hope everyone is doing well on this Friday evening. Um, it's been a minute since I've been on, and that's because my studies and working on translating some text and all that is taking up all my time. So, I haven't been able to troll the internet like I know y'all want me to do. Uh, but, periodically I show up just to stir the waters a bit with, of course, vibrant and relevant information regarding African people and African history and culture and language and the like. So, as we stated in the beginning, our special guest today is Dr. Dennis Ausar Winkler. So there's two Asars on the same platform today. So it's going to be powerful. And make sure you have your seatbelts on for this discussion here. And so before I bring my esteemed guest, I just want to introduce him formally so you can get a little bit about his background so you know the context in which we're going to be having this conversation today. So, Dr. Dennis Ausar Winkler Jr., I need to add the junior on there, um, PhD, LCPC, NCC, and he's going to let us know what all those CCs mean in just a moment. Affectionately known as Dr. Daw uh, for short. Was born on January 22nd, 1979, the same year I was born, in Baltimore, Maryland, and is an accomplished entrepreneur, psychotherapist, educator, and community advocate. He is married to his high school sweetheart, Camille Winkler, if I'm saying that correctly. They share two sons, Dennis III and Jamil. Um, Dr. Winkler graduated magna cum laude from Sojourner Douglas College with a BA in administration and earned an MS in clinical mental health counseling from Loyola University in Maryland, focusing on spirituality and psychology. He holds a PhD in counseling education and supervision from Waynesburg University, where his dissertation was titled Measuring the Relationship of Race-Based Trauma, Racial Identity, and Spirituality. So that little nugget of racial identity is the reason why we have him today, because it seems like our people are losing their minds. And so we need somebody who knows about the mind to step in and help our people to reorient back to their divine selves. So with that being said, I want to bring to the platform Dr. Dennis Ausar Winkler Jr. Um, I ain't gonna say Junior throughout the night, but
My father was
welcome to
first name.
the welcome to the Umbongi.
Blessings, blessings. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
No doubt, no doubt. And for those of you who are watching via Facebook, if you leave a comment on the asarimhotep public page, your comments will show up on this platform. But if it's on the Harold Johnson page, it's not going to show up here. So if you're on that page, you want to make a comment or ask a question, I would advise you to come directly to the YouTube channel, and you will be able to leave your comment or question there. So uh, tell us a little bit more about yourself, in terms of why you went in the educational direction that you did. What inspired you to look at psychology and counseling, mental health, and things of that nature? Uh, we'll start there.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. Thanks for again for having me on, brother Asam Hotep. And I've been following your work for some time, so it's definitely a pleasure and honor. I see you as one of our really great minds out here doing the work. Sometimes the great minds aren't necessarily always in the algorithm, but we're going to do our best of being in the algorithm. But nonetheless, I really appreciate you as a scholar. Um, so I have some experience as growing up in what African Senate spaces. So I guess I would say I don't know how first or second generation type of thing. I'm saying, well, my father was first, then here comes I. So the thing is, I learned a lot growing up, and it opened my mind up that where I couldn't close it back up. But nonetheless, I got into, just to kind of speed it up, I went into ministry at some point, honestly, under Dr. Ray Hagins. In fact, I was the national director or international director of operations for the African Village and Cultural Center, and I did all types of spiritual things. It's always been about this spiritual thing when it comes to psychology. I always been a student of the mind when it comes to psychology and spirituality. And when you read out scholars, they say that we can't disconnect the spirit. So in that sense, I was one, a servant to my community, to my people. And what I realized is that I needed some more tools. I needed some more skills. I've been an entrepreneur. I'm pretty successful. I didn't need to go back to school for money and all that type of thing, but I wanted to better aid my people. And I always studied the psychology of the mind before I even did my let's say traditional education, taking that traditional education route. So that's why you see from business. In fact, I went back to school for business because I could earn some credits, because I've been an entrepreneur for such a long time. I could get what they call, I forgot what they call, like real life or something like that. I could write papers and prove that I satisfied certain things. And I'm going to say, a powerful school that people really didn't know about. They came through this African Senate Pan-African struggle. And a lot of times we say we haven't had anything but Sojourner Douglas College here in Baltimore, Maryland, which actually sadly no longer exists, but in spirit, it came about in the Black Power era. And I think it was a wonderful place. I just actually did a interview not too long ago with Dr. Charles Simmons, who was the president and founder of that school, which came through Pan-Africanism and African Senate thought. But nonetheless, I realized when people would come into the ministry with addiction problems and grief and all these different things that I needed some more skills. So I went back to school with the intent to sharpen my understanding, my way of understanding the problem, my way of being, and my way of intervening and engaging with our community, because the problems are serious, and that's what I did.
Sorry, have it on mute just in case any loud fire trucks or anything
No problem.
that always pass by uh, is here. And so you're already grounded because of your father,
Yes.
in the tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in essence, you're really kind of just expanding on the foundation in which uh, your parents have set,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
saying for you in this way. And uh, I want to first and foremost give a shout out to Dr. Mott. Um, and she's been doing some great work out there in Baltimore, Maryland. And how did y'all, you know, uh, link up or meet?
So, I got to be honest. When I love people, I love Baltimore, and Baltimore doesn't always get that light that it should. People from outside think everybody just killing everybody in Baltimore, right? And everybody it's just you go through Baltimore, you will not make it out alive. That's kind of the rep we got. But
It's
nonetheless,
the wire.
it's the wire, the corner, the wild east. you know,
Yeah.
you know. But I mean, there's aspects of that, but the reality is there's also a rich tradition of community activists and organizers and Pan-African organizers and bookstores and all types of things. I would say Baltimore, if you really, how I'm not sure, you're in Philly?
Yes.
I would say quite, how the Islam has that kind of that hold on Philly. I think quiet is kept. The Pan-African ideology has a certain resonance here in Baltimore. And because people come in like, wow, everybody's kind of African centered, or even if you don't identify as a Pan-Africans or African centered, it's you can feel it. It is a part of the culture. So I saw Dr. Mayat on Brother Sinetta's show some years ago, and I said, wow,
Mm.
I like how she brought it. I like how she came with the information. She came with the data, the research, the facts, and I felt alone many times because sometimes in these African-centered spaces, sometimes we, especially during that time, we were going a little too far from my standpoint to the, I don't know, to call it the left sometimes or the right. One of the ways we just was off balance and off kilter. So I saw her on the show and I invited her on my podcast at that point in time before podcasting became what it is now, called the Conscious Black Business Network, where we had a series of podcasts, and she came on and she, we did it, and we've been hitting it off ever since then with a real close relationship.
Indeed. And lastly, tell us a little bit about um, the Temple of New African Thought. Uh, what is it about, and how did it come about?
Mm. So the Temple of New African Thought is an outgrowth of the African Village and Cultural Center here in Baltimore, which I was the first. Initially, I started off as the coordinator, then became the minister, and then from there, we've evolved over the years working with the African Village and Culture Center. Some things changed internally in the African Village and Culture Center, so we evolved and formulated into what we now call the Temple of New African Thought, and also TNAT Holistic Wellness Center. And just to let you know, we're still close and connected with all the African villages across the country, including Dr. Ray Hagen's. But nonetheless, he even share with us. You look, go do your things, go do y'all. You know what I mean? But so with that, in essence, I do have, I have love for the African village, but I'm saying is I also have difference. I'm a very let's say I'm a person that thinks a lot. So nonetheless, but I still understand building is essential, even with ideas that you might not completely agree with. But nonetheless, so now it grew from a study group to a ministry to a wellness center where we have everything from Tai Chi to martial arts, meditation, a dojo on the bottom level. On the main level, we have a bookstore, cafe, Diaspora and Soul Jamaican American Fusion Restaurant, Diaspora and Soul Jamaican American Fusion Diaspora and Soul Jamaican American Fusion Restaurant, where people can come gather. We have an event space. We do a lot there. Then on the top floor, on the top level, like in this where I'm now, we do counseling. We do men's groups. We have group rooms. We have other counseling rooms and things of that nature. So we do a lot. I know I'm missing some things. We take it from an integrated or holistic approach, and that's kind of like was my idea in returning back to school to be able to do that. So we do a lot of things, and everything is about healing and aiding in the healing and liberation of African people.
Indeed. And I hope to make it there soon, because of course, we always see your videos and in the space, and I always wanted to just come and check it out.
Mm-hmm.
I've only been to Baltimore maybe like two or three times, and so I'm not too familiar with the city and the like. I've been by Drew Hill,
Now that I
the
think
the
about
bad
it,
dude.
I think I'm trying to figure. I think didn't you come? You may have come to our facility when we had a very small facility on Harford Road before. I'm not sure. Did you come
I
that time it
couldn't
had to
tell you.
be? Yeah, it was a while ago, probably 10 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, it's been a minute. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the last time that I went there, I went to a um, whatever that bookstore is that everybody goes to.
Okay,
Uh,
that was the
in the-
okay. That was a long time ago. I remember I went there, so it was probably
yeah,
So was it Sinjetti? I can't. My dear brother, Sinjetti.
Sanjetti, yes,
Sinjetti. Yeah.
Sanjetti
Okay.
Afra.
Yeah. So I did go to that particular event when y'all were here in Baltimore. Everyone's Place Bookstore with Baba
Yeah,
Nati and Mama.
uh, yes. Um, so in every now and then it seems that you mentioned, for example, that in Baltimore, uh, and you can tell I'm not from Baltimore because I say the T in Baltimore, but in Baltimore,
Mm-hmm.
uh, there is even if it's not overt, there's influence of African centered consciousness
Mm-hmm.
there,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems like when African centered consciousness and Pan Africanism grows, there's this concerted effort to say, no, you're not African, you're something else.
Mm-hmm.
And the latest wave, you know, seems to be this FBA movement, this foundational Black American movement.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to start off asking you the question of what is your understanding of what this movement is? Where did it start? And if you can interject, what are the implications of such this particular FBA movement and the like?
Okay, so I'll do my best, and I'll frame it from a psychological conceptualization. I'll call it a psychosocial conceptualization, and that also includes some historical conceptualization as well. Um, Now, when I think about FBA, if I'm answering this correctly, I have identified it as an identity. They say it's a lineage. Um, I say it's an identity with an ideology. They say it's a neutral identity, meaning that this is the way that we now label ourselves instead of African American. So they say that it's just a way to identify that replaces African American. They make it more specific that can so that we can parse out or differentiate or delineate is their term the difference between African Americans as we all call now, and they said that is inclusive of people with Caribbean lineage, other diasporic lineage, and also continental lineage from Africa. And they say by saying you're FBA, foundational Black American, this makes it more specific to us whose ancestors were enslaved here in this United States. I say, okay, I can deal with that to some degree if that's what it was doing, if that's what it's doing. But I say, one, that's not what it's doing. And two, I'm wondering even if it's necessary, because I think they're giving too much weight to a term called FBA because they're trying to get what they call reparations or whatever. That's this. I mean, they have all types of stories. It's all types of mythology. So I say there's ideology, and the ideology is. I was thinking the other day. I had Brother Diallo Kenyatta on the show the other day, and I shared with him that I think that sometimes we get lost in the idea of FBA as anti-African. And then I thought about it and I said, well, FBA is really anti-Pan-Africanist. And this goes back to what you were saying earlier. You know, there always seems to be this type of movement that rises up to try to combat Pan-Africanism or Pan-African thought, Afrocentric thought, African-centered thought, however we want to identify. And, you know, I know you're a bit nuanced with that as well. But nonetheless, specifically Pan-Africanism or Pan-African thought. They have an ideology. What I mean by that, people would argue that they don't have an ideology. I said that they have talking points. They have catechisms. They have apologetics. Go ahead. You about to say something? Yeah. They.
No. I was just agreeing. Like,
yeah,
I wasn't going to say that. But go ahead.
So even my brother Diallo was debating me the other day, but an ideology. In fact, I looked in this book today. I said, you know, I put out a book from probably, I don't know, I probably was in like probably undergrad or something way back when somewhere, right? And I said, and it has this brief definition of ideology, which we can extrapolate a bit more. It says it's simple as this, right? Beliefs that justify social arrangements. So, and you don't even really have to say much more than that, but ideology can get deeper than that. But beliefs that justify social arrangements. FBA believes that we are the indigenous to this country, indigenous blacks, and indigenous blacks have always been here. They usurp the native or First Nation people's identity. They do this with all types of trickery. So they believe that the outer Africa theory is to some degree, I don't know, but some of them believe that they have, let's say, a variety of lineages within the FBA movement as a current. But they also critique Pan-Africanism as being, let's say, somewhat unable to agree on things. But they're a very small movement, and they don't tend to agree on anything. In fact, I think it's very difficult to agree on a thing when you say you don't have an ideology.
Indeed.
Or where did it come from? So where did it come from? Now, from my estimation, it came from a brother named Tariq Nasheed. He actually owns the, what is it called? The trademark to it. He actually defined it. He actually defines many of the ideas behind it, even including the anti-African, anti-Pan-Africanist thoughts. Again, he owns the trademark. And again, he usurped from my little brief historical overview, usurped the idea from Yvette Carnell, Antonio Moore, who were the founders of what they call ADOS, ADOS, which means American descendant of slaves, American descendant of slaves. And both movements tend to be anti-immigrant. No, they are anti-immigrant, and specifically anti-African immigrant or Black immigrant or Caribbean immigrant. And they have a lot of points of views that they can't substantiate as pertains to our people collectively, globally. And when I mean our people, I mean African people.
Yeah, they seem to be all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And I gathered that that a lot of them are kind of trying to, use that word that you brought up earlier, delineate
Mm-hmm.
themselves from Tariq Nasheed, because he further clarifies what he means by an FBA.
Mm-hmm.
And it includes, he understands that, uh, he's taking it from the standpoint that there are African people
Mm-hmm.
who came here in America, and we're foundational to the American project
Mm-hmm.
itself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is where we've been for the last 400 years,
Mm-hmm.
and our stake and stuff is here. But he also extends it, and it's like, some of us were here
Mm-hmm.
before, the thing. So, but because now my pushback from what you're saying is that I would agree that there's some that are anti Pan African, and
Mm-hmm.
then there's a good number of them who are just plain anti-African. And so they'll say we have
Both.
nothing to do with those Africans. That's not us. We're the
Mm-hmm.
real Native Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we have the colloquial term for them, pretendians,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and so because this is something, of course, that's not based on scholarship, and that's my big thing, is it's can we get the scholarship correct first
Mm-hmm.
before y'all start trying to create movements
Mm-hmm.
out of things. And like, for example, like I've had several debates on my Facebook page,
Okay.
right? Not no formal debates, but just because I accept friends from all walks of life, or Facebook friends of all walks of life. So I got all kinds of stuff uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
going down my timeline, and there again, and this is why I say there's a lot of them that are just anti-African, and they're like, African American. We didn't even use that term
Mm-hmm.
until 1988 with
Mm-hmm.
Jesse Jackson, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, y'all do know that we have documentation of this term being used in 1792, right? But
Mm-hmm.
not only that, the African really is our ethnic name. That's the
Mm-hmm.
name our ancestors chose, which is why those first organizations were named African. Like, we named ourselves African. And then later on we added the American to it. And then we
Mm-hmm.
shortened that to Afro American. It's just a shortening. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
they're not talking about the hairstyle. This
Mm-hmm.
is the Afro, and Afro American is short for African, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can pull up all this documentation of books written by African American peoples calling us African Americans, and Africans, and newspapers, primary source material, right?
Yes, sir.
The
Yes, sir.
the various organizations that we created, in spaces where we can, organize. They named them the African this or the African American this, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so, um, part of my gripe is that they're very poor scholars in general. And when you don't do scholarship, you can just make up stuff, right? Like, I'm like, y'all don't even talk to y'all. They say my grandmother said we were Indian,
Yeah.
right? I'm like, y'all don't talk to y'all elders. Like, my grandfather is in his 80s,
Mm-hmm.
And during my grandfather's time, if you was to call another man black, it was equivalent to calling him the N-word, right? Which is why in the 60s and going into the 70s, you know, you have, for example, James Brown, you know, I'm black and I'm proud. We're taking that word and making it our own because people didn't want to be called black. Prior to that, we was calling ourselves African, African American, Negro, colored, right? And Negro is just another word for black, right? And so it's because they have no sense of history, they or we should say, you know, there was a collective amnesia. You know, this is why they can just make up stuff like this. And you know, we're living in this age where everybody has a phone, so you can just log in and say what you want. And if it goes viral, you know, you have that moment. So I'm trying to, you know, figure out, you know, and of course we need somebody with a, a, a psychology background to tell us what are these social variables and the like that is just continuing to make descendants of African descended people in the United States so anti-African to the point where they feel that, you know, it is better to be an Indian than to be a black African from the continent of Africa.
That's an awesome question. And I you know, and I agree that they are anti-African. You know, they play a game with that though. You know, it's not all of them. But I haven't heard many of them who really understand what it is not claim to be not what they seem to all agree to be anti-Pan-Africanist though. I mean, like generally they tend to agree that we're anti-Pan-Africanists. I think that's really essential to point out. Like, because sometimes I never even hear that conversation as much as they, you know, because we're protecting our brothers and sisters across the world. But they really say, oh no, that Pan-Africanist stuff is dead. They say that Pan-Africanism is a dream. It is an ideal, is idealistic, and is never going to happen. You know, so I think it is essential to understand that they're anti-African. For sure, they're anti-Pan-Africanists, and they can't even debate that one. I don't think they would debate that one. I don't, you know, so go, you about to say something? Oh no. Okay. So I think though, so when we look at our elders and our ancestors, especially in the psychological world, those like the Akbars and the Wilsons, and even one great scholar that many people don't know, and he's debated all of them in a sense, but he's very profound in academia nonetheless, is William Cross and his model, the racial, what was it, Negrison's model. And there's some variables, you know, just for the sake of conversation, that is included in his model of Black identity, which typically it goes as follows. The expanded model is assimilationist, is self-hatred, is anti-white sentiment, is miseducation, is Afrocentrist, and then you have what they call multicultural inclusive. So one thing to really realize is that William Cross understands that model, there's all types of identities that this model can capture, and it will continue to capture. And I think that when we look at FBA, they are their own type of identity, and they can, you know, maybe there needs to be some more research in categorizing them. But off the top of my mind, in the way that I conceptualize it, utilizing, let's say, William Cross's model, I definitely think there's miseducation there, just as you spoke earlier. There's miseducation going on, and there's also, I would argue, there's a part of our trauma, our unhealed trauma, that Dr. Marimba, I think we have to pull in all of them. We have to pull in the anthropologists. We have to pull in the sociologists. We have to pull in the, from a conceptualization requires it all. You have to bring in the history. And that's what mental health practitioners do, by the way. You have to bring in a history on an individual level as well as on a collective global societal level. So we cannot negate our trauma here in America through what Dr. Marimba calls the Biafra, and that experience that continues, that Dr. Joy DeGruy calls post-traumatic slave syndrome, as Dr. Patricia Newton calls post-traumatic slave disorder, what Dr. Akbar calls a type of post-traumatic slave and post-traumatic stress disorder. So all of our scholars kind of agree, and they use different terms, that there's a trauma that has happened. And when one deals with trauma and it's unhealed trauma, lots of times what happens with the people, we become delusional because we have to imagine things and create myths, and we look at the world in a very fragmented, unhealthy, unrealistic way. And that's just what people do on an individual level when they have been traumatized. And when you've been traumatized and you unhealed, what you do is you see things not as wholes, you see things in fragments, and then you fill in the blanks with all types of other things. So people who have been through a certain level of trauma, what happens with them is that they misidentify that which is a threat. And I'm talking about on an individual level. They begin to believe anything that smells like, looks like, tastes like, anything the five senses has that reminds you of the initial trauma or the traumatic event, that is the thing. So we're dealing with a lot of people who can't think outside of a black and white mindset. Hence, the equivalent to me would be like a MAGA, because these are traumatized white people. And black people would join in with them, but all of them are traumatized. I mean, I'm not going to say all. I'm going to say, yes, there's traumatic patterns going on within that part of that population, quite like you find in our dear brothers and sisters who call themselves FBA. I know some of them, and they jump from one organization to another one, and it happens to be these far right type of black organizations. I would say that you can easily call FBA a far-right black identity movement. Now, I don't know where I got lost, but I know you asked me a question. And so this is, okay, going back to Cross's model. Cross's model, then miseducation, self-hatred is definitely in there. And self-hatred and miseducation and what you call even anti-white sentiment, these are what you could call internalized racism. We speak about internalized racism on a more, let's say, a more global or more, let's say global level. But when you break it down, these are three components that make up that which people call internalized racism. You hate white people so much, you refuse to see any truth outside of that. You hate yourself so much, you refuse to see any truth outside of that. You in all of the trauma, what actually makes it more easy for you to be gullible in becoming miseducated. Because when you're traumatized and you're operating from a hyper state of arousal, alert, and all that type of thing, you miss key aspects of information. Again, you miss the nuance, and really what happens is you're operating in what they call a traumatic state, and you're operating in survival mode. You're operating out of necessity. At least it feels like it. So now you think that your brothers and sisters are Africans, brothers and sisters, and the Caribbean brothers and sisters, and anybody else who looks like they're going to come take your reparations is a real thing. But you can't even sort out the information in a way that said, that don't even make sense that I just changed this label and somehow that's going to make this a possibility.
They even within that statement, there's an assumption that white people is going to give you reparations.
Absolutely.
for the Africans to take. But
I was trying to play good, but yes, absolutely. Yeah. That's an ideal. If we want to talk about ideal,
Now we in a previous conversation, we brought up this phenomenal text. I don't know if it'll show up.
Yes,
Dr.
that's
Amos
it.
Wilson's
Mm-hmm.
The Falsification of African Consciousness, Eurocentric History, Psychiatry, and the Politics of White Supremacy.
Absolutely.
And one of my gripes is that you know this the rise of FBA is also um, in conjunction with the rise of anti-intellectualism, in the United States. And I
Mm-hmm.
know causation, correlation doesn't equal causation,
Mm-hmm.
but there's something to be looked at there. But I want to, based upon what you just said, I wanted to get your uh, response to this particular statement in the appendix on page 122 of this particular text. I'm just read this part of the paragraph. So Dr. Wilson says, moreover, dominant white regimes have and do so expertly and consistently associated the history and culture of Africans with the evocation of feelings of shame, guilt, anxiety, betrayal, alienation, fear of social disapproval, mental and physical abuse, social ridicule, loss of social and economic status, humiliation, and all other types of aversive emotions and consequences
Mm-hmm.
until in pursuit of ego and self defense, many Africans have and do feel compelled to reject and repress the search for the discovery of a true liberating knowledge of themselves,
Mm-hmm.
thus creating the social amnesia which makes them behave like the reactionary puppets strung along by the machinations of their dominant white puppeteers.
Yeah.
And I believe this is part of the conversation that isn't brought up or addressed in terms of how existing here in the United States
Mm-hmm.
and other places of colonial um, dominance has made being African something to be ashamed of. And as a result of the trauma, as you mentioned earlier, they go out of their way to avoid learning about Africans and their history and the true liberation and liberating philosophies and ideas that emerge out of being African and African culture in general. Thus,
Mm-hmm.
they go to the extremes um, by trying to be um, pretendians and other things. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on that statement from
Mm.
him, from Dr. Wilson.
Yeah, so I agree with that, and I would say that again, many of our scholars have said that, and we don't we really don't understand what they're saying, and we say it, but truly we don't understand the the impact that this society, our stay here in America, has had on us. So as Dr. Akbar says that look, it's a miracle that we still exist. He says that look, it's a miracle, and I don't know if you remember like the one of his speeches. He says that look, we got a lot of stuff going on in our community. I mean, fighting, all this, that brother smoking crack over there. He said, look, put the crack pipe in the pocket and let's go for liberation. We'll figure that out when we get there. So I'm saying it is really hurt our people. And I don't think people really know. I'm saying even academicians who study psychology until you start to sit in the room with our brothers and sisters. I don't think we truly understand how delusional we truly are. And I'm saying that we are under a spell. Dr. Joy DeGruy calls it, she talks about her post-traumatic slave syndrome. She talks about, and I'm going to bring it back. I just love bringing scholars, and I call it living libations. You know what I mean? I like to bring in our warriors who still here, who's gone into the other side. I like to bring them in, and I like to show how they all are saying the same thing. And I'm saying, really, it might label it different, but they're saying that we are under a trance. Even the brother Cleo Monago, he's got this thing called trauma trance. You know, it's this trance that we're under that we don't really, we have to really realize it's real. That trauma. And let me go back to what Dr. Drew DeGruy real quick. She speaks about this belief, our belief system. When you've been through such a great trauma, your belief system is out of whack, and we refuse to believe it. Dr. Amos Wilson argues that we have to begin to use our left and right side of our brains because we like to stay on that right side, and we like to be out in all the imagination and imagine and astral project and do all the different things, but we don't like to put our feet on the earth. And even this movement here, it sounds like your feet is on the earth, but really it is as delusional as some of the mythologies out there. And we truly don't understand that. We think that somehow that we are planted and this is real, but the reality, it is delusional at best. Now, your question was.
and real quick, like on the following page starts his discussion on delusion.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know if I answered the question. What was the
no?
So
it was just to get your response about the effect of existing here in the United States and the European oppression,
and let's tie
contributing to the anti-African.
And let's tie it together. I appreciate. Let's tie it together. Afrophobia, Wade Nobles, many of us got Afrophobia. We are afraid of to be African. Dr. Joy DeGruy has a I don't know if it's her dissertation or another article, and she speaks about healing that place. I can't remember exactly. It's like healing that place that you could not accept. You understand? It's like that black side of you, that African is in you. Like, we have to heal that space. I don't care if you got Native American in you. I don't care if you got white in you, and you can accept all of that. I'm not even going to argue about that. But what I am saying is, why can you accept all of that, but not accept the African in you? And you want to say, well, I accept that, but when I hear you talk, it is very evident. I am a psychotherapist, and what I'm saying is, I know I can hear what you're saying between the lines. You don't have to say the thing. As a therapist, you're trained to look for what the person isn't saying and understand the patterns and see how to hear the patterns and not get lost in what they're saying, but look for the patterns in what they're not saying, because they're saying a lot, but saying nothing. Because sometimes they don't even know. So they might say, I don't hate myself. Like, you can tell a client in the room, you can say, well, they'll be like, I don't get angry. And then you have to show them the patterns. I'm not angry. You have to show them the patterns. And so this Afrophobia, again, internalized racism that we talk about, internalized racism mean that miseducation piece, that self-hatred piece, and even including that anti-white sentiment piece. And what I mean is, I'm not telling you how to feel about white people, but if white people on your mind 24/7, that is a part of the trauma. If you can't drink white, if you can't eat yogurt because it look white, that's a trauma. You understand?
White bread.
You can't do
it's almost like it's almost like, I'm pretty sure y'all have gangs in Baltimore. So I'm from the South, and like in Texas, Texas really, it's the South, but it really starts the West Coast. So like the whole Bloods and Crips thing is, was real early,
Mm-hmm.
in Texas, and and I grew up in Crip neighborhoods,
Mm-hmm.
so you it'll get so ridiculous that you couldn't say words with B in it because we representing Bloods, and then you go to Blood neighborhoods, they taking out all the C's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in words and replacing it with B's. Like that's traumatic into itself that
Mm-hmm.
you would do that, and it would be the equivalent of what you're saying here, of folks trying to anything white. But to that point, that's part of the discussion as well, because
Mm-hmm.
one, they're very contradictory in
Mm-hmm.
things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they on one hand, like when we say, okay, well, take a DNA test
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and let's see the haplogroups and the collective genetic markers,
Mm-hmm.
to see historically where you are from and
Mm-hmm.
in what time period, right?
Mm-hmm.
They be like, oh, that's the white man science,
Mm-hmm.
and we ain't, those tests are not trustworthy.
That's it.
But then they'll try to send us a random book written by a white man that says, this particular Native American tribe, look copper colored or black or whatnot. So I'm like, why should we trust this white man, but not the white man that created the DNA test and all this other kind of stuff? Like they're real wishy washy depending on what position they have. But
Mm-hmm.
I would assume again that that's part of the trauma as well. Like it's made you confused.
No, it absolutely is a part of the trauma, because anything you have what they call selective. What is like you select what you want to believe, and if it supports the myth that you have, then that's how you support and affirm your belief. You know what I mean? People use the word science, as Dr. Joy DeGruy talks about it. She talks about it in her book. She says that we argue as black people talking about it's a scientific fact, and we think that's supposed to stop all the conversation until you actually enter some real science into the conversation. The same people that are anti-scientific or ascientific or whatever, they want to use science when it supports their stuff, and it really doesn't. They just want to be selective in it. Anything that affirms what you believe, and that is what a traumatized person does. A traumatized person, you cannot convince them when they're traumatized. I'm not saying a person who experienced trauma. That is different. When I say a traumatized person, I am speaking about a person who operates in a traumatized state. A person who is in a hyper state of arousal, cortisol levels are high, and all these different things. It doesn't allow you to have higher reasoning or functioning or even empathy. And that is why you see people like the FBAers and the MAGA people and all, they don't have too much empathy. They don't give a hell about you. All they trying to do is survive, and that is what people who are operating in a traumatized state do.
It reminds me, like I'm back in school, extending my knowledge on computer science and artificial intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Developing large language models. So we have to
Yes, sir.
take a number of linguistic courses, and we also, like, I'm currently taking one course, of course, uh, with psychology. So it's interesting that we recently read a chapter where they're discussing, or they're having a debate on the so-called repressed memories.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and and whether that's a real thing, that you experienced some trauma when you were very young, and is it possible for you to be able to recall that
Mm-hmm.
memory in the present as an adult, with clarity and whatnot. So without going into that debate or whatnot, it's still interesting that the notion of repressed memories and how the body or the mind responds to trauma to try to block it out and eliminate it and
Mm-hmm.
make saying new memories. So that was one of the things that it was discussing, was that under scientific scrutiny, they were showing that certain people were just making up new memories, and not recalling
That's it.
uh, the actual trauma or whatnot. So even in this, it seems like there's some kind of correlation even in this FBA space, to where like they whatever the trauma was, they put it to the back of the mind, and to feel whole they had to make up new histories, new memories, and things of that nature. And it's
Oh
so it's just
no.
funny that you said that.
Oh no, it
I'm
ain't
sorry, go ahead.
funny. No, you right and exact. And in fact, I'm creating what we call Ingia. Actually, some of my initiates are on right now, and I have
Hmm.
I'm developing the book Ingia Cycle. The name of the book is another name, but is Ingia Philosophy and Psychotherapy. And basically, I mean, in theory. So the thing is, though, what you're saying about repressed memories is, I mean, I don't know what the debate is, but they are real.
Hmm.
And maybe there's some aspects of the debate, but in reality, it happens. And people lose their mind when those repressed thoughts or memories come back to them. And the difference, and I want to clarify repression from suppression. Repressed memories are those that you don't do, they just disappear. Repress is like your mind and your body is saying, look, you can't handle this. You didn't try to push it down. It just disappeared on its own. When you talk about suppress, you're suppressing it. You're pushing it down yourself. You're intentionally blocking that off, but it can come back anytime. But a repressed memory is one of those things that it's kind of like people who've been traumatized. What happens is it was so much pain to have to deal with the fact that your daddy had did this to you. You can only imagine that type of thing. And then when you turn 35, and then your man touches you a certain way, or vice versa, and your father did that when you were 4, and it just comes back, and like it brings about a crisis state, because now a flood of memories come back. And our FBA brothers and sisters, they have some what they call historical amnesia going on, as Dr. Tony Broad, Bob Tony Broad, and all the rest of our elders talked about. That is real. And I mean, I know that's on a social level, but in order to heal, though, I will say this: we have to go back and deal with that history in a more. And another thing you said something very profound, that these are fragments. And this is what I said earlier. These are fragments. You fill in the gaps. If you recall what you said,
Yeah.
that goes along with what I said. You have to fill in the gaps when you've been through trauma, because nobody really remembers the trauma quite like it happened, because your body is not, you're just trying to survive. You feel overwhelmed. You're in fight and flight. You know, you can't, like most of us who've been in fights before, realize after the fight, or if you ever been suspended or you've been in the office and they like, what happened? You like, damn, I don't even know what. Then you just start lying. You be like, look, he hit
Yeah,
me
I
first.
blacked out.
Yeah, you hit me, and then look, he hit me first. You don't even know who hit who first. You don't know what this person said. Just like your argument with your significant other, you will be swearing to each other that both of y'all lying. And the reality is, most people just don't remember, because you've been in a hyper state of arousal, and that type of memory is not serving you at that point. It's just survival.
Indeed. Like I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and I don't know if this was, a personal uh, therapy session or whatnot, but I brought up the fact that I'm not a real good date if we're going to the bar, because I don't drink alcohol. I've
Mm-hmm.
never drunken alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
I've never smoked anything, cigarettes, weed, anything like that.
We're kindred.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and it wasn't for no deep philosophy and can't poison the body and da 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 da. I got cookies right here. It ain't the most healthiest thing, sugar with that. That's not the argument.
Mm-hmm.
But like in the conversation, I remember when we was first moving to Houston from New Orleans, and I
Mm-hmm.
was real little. And the guy who was, so my dad had this blue pickup truck,
Mm-hmm.
and so him and my mom were in the pickup truck,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just me and because it was only two of us. It's five of us in total. So at this age, it's only two of us,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, are with a family member whose name I do not remember at this particular time,
Mm-hmm.
and he was drinking beer the entire ride. So I don't know if you know how long uh, New Orleans is to Houston,
Mm.
right? It is it's like an 8 hour ride at minimum. So I don't know how long he was drinking and
Mm-hmm.
driving along the way,
Mm-hmm.
but that I do remember. And when we got to, and somehow he didn't crash or anything, so that's not the story. But
Mm-hmm.
when we got to Houston and got to the apartment, he done drunk so much that he peed on himself,
Mm-hmm.
and he was just talking crazy. And I remember my dad telling us to go upstairs, and him and my dad, had it out, and I ain't seen him, saying ever since, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you know, like I asked myself at the end of the conversation, like I wonder if that's why I don't drink alcohol
Mm-hmm.
or whatnot. Like I've seen how it is, like from an early age, and I was like, nah, I don't want to drink. I don't know if that's the case, but I'm just saying to your point of how
Mm-hmm.
how certain memories, because I don't know if I suppressed it or it was repressed. Nonetheless, it came, at that instant, like, yeah, I remember that, da 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 da. And um so it may help to explain, but so I had to look into, like, certain folks, like, were they too dark? Did they come up in the 80s when dark skin wasn't cool, and the light skin was in, and until Denzel and Wesley Snipes came out, uh you know and then, of course, on the other end, people don't, like, remember at the beginning of the Boys in the Hood, when Trey was young and in school, and he said that, we come from Africa, and the other ones, I ain't no
Yeah.
African. I'm from
Yeah.
Crenshaw Mafia.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He's calling him an African booty scratcher,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And you hear these Africans who come here, and they have those stories of African Americans, you know, um, abusing them and belittling them for being African, and we even did it to ourselves, and tried to. So I wonder, like, were you the victims of those types of conversations in elementary school? Being called an African booty scratcher and all this, and where did this stuff come from, and the like. To speak to your point.
Yeah. Um that's a conceptualization. And that is what clinicians are trained to do, is form conceptualizations of what might be happening. And again, some will call that a hypothesis, and then you test it, you do all that in your clinical work. But that could be a conceptualization that you explore with our individual clients. But I'm saying on a social level, um, we could explore that with our dear FBA brothers and sisters who say that they're not part of an organization, that this is just a pure lineage, without an ideology and all these type of things. But there's definitely ideology, and what you're talking about, what some will call is implicit memory. Is that memory that you don't even have to, or subconscious memory is in your body, is physical. It's like learning how
Yeah.
to ride a bike. You don't have to really put it here very explicitly or remember. It just happens. So yeah.
On a side note, I had a hypothesis the other day
Mhm.
about, because, of course, you can't, at least, I've taken in undergrad, black psychology,
Mhm.
right? But it wasn't too much focus on the physical brain and all this other kind of stuff. And then, of course, they talk about, like, all the wrinkles in the brain. And I always, they bring up the question is, where is memory stored? What is memory, right? And my hypothesis is that there is probably like connected to the wrinkles itself, and I wonder if it's uh like how the grooves on a record are, and when the needle, saying, goes over a particular point in the and it plays back the sound, you know. Uh, but I also had the question of, because I understand, physics and how, sound is that, rush of air. Of course, you need air as the medium, and then it goes into your ear and hits your eardrums and hits the hairs in your ear, and it turns into electrical signals, and then it translates in your brain as sound, right? But what is the sound in, for those of, because I know that there's some people who don't have an internal voice, but like, where does the sound, when you're thinking about a song in your head, come from? Or you hear your mother's, voice and the like, where does that internal sound come from if there's no medium and there's no external point or whatnot? And do we have to, reconceptualize like our understanding of sound, trying to answer those particular questions? But those are just side uh, conversations or whatnot. But I see our good brother 42 Tribes in the building, and he had asked a question on the adversement dealing with ADOS, and I think this would be a good segment to go into, uh, because like, as a person who deals with identity and the like, especially when one of the questions I asked was about how do indigenous African people, when they wanted to name themselves, what were the criterion by which they named themselves, right? Like when the Europeans, of course, in 1884, 1885, create at the Berlin Conference, carved up Africa. They just named, these particular territories that they carved up for themselves. And of course, there was an area called Upper Volta. And when they got their independence, they called it Burkina Faso, which means the land of the upright people. And this is a prime example of when people name themselves, they name themselves dealing with either a particular goal or ideal, you know, human being for which their people are supposed to represent. And so for them, the goal is, or the statement is, that this is the place where people of integrity and good character, saying, exist and live or whatnot. And I don't see that kind of depth when a lot of us are trying to rename ourselves or whatnot. But I want to, and you can address that if you want. But what did 42 Tribes say? He says, so wait, so identifying as ADOS is part of an identity crisis, but identifying as African isn't? What would you say to that statement or that question?
Well, I don't think the conversation was just that simple. No one said just identifying as the letters ADOS is an identity crisis. It has more to do the meaning behind those letters and why you chose to use that particular acronym, not the acronym itself, but the words American descendant of slave. And it's not just that, it's also the ideology behind it that we're speaking, well, at least I'm speaking to. The ideology itself is indicative of an identity crisis. I think genetically there's no argument whether or not we are of African descent. But there's no argument whether or not you are of well, some of us are of what you want to call enslaved Africans here in this hemisphere. But it's not that. It is the meaning making that's behind that. I can get with it if it didn't also have a problem with really accepting your whole self. It's kind of like a child who goes, or maybe a teenager who goes through, if you look at Erickson stages, that's a European model, but the reality is there's some legitimacy there. And you can, and you get to what is it? Identity versus, I can't think of it, formation or something. Nonetheless, you struggle with knowing yourself. And to be ADOS is not to accept your entire self. Just like many people don't accept themselves. They say things like, I don't know myself. And some people refuse to see themselves because it's too hard to look at. And that goes back to that trauma that we were speaking to. Sometimes it's too hard to look in the mirror. And lots of times people who have traumatic experiences, who have unhealed traumas and wounds, don't want to face reality of who they are completely. And that is what ADOS doesn't do. Accept us in our fullness. Yes, we have brothers and sisters and mamas and babas and ancestors and all that came through this transatlantic experience or the Mayafa. We accept that. I think people I'm going to say majority of people who are Pan-Africanists or African Senate or just identify themselves as African descendants accept that we have an experience here and also on the continent as well, genetically. But the problem with ADOS, moreover, FBA, is that they come up with a bunch of narratives to disconnect them from their complete story. And that right there is indicative of a identity crisis, especially a traumatic one. Because people who have been through trauma, especially at young ages and developmentally, they struggle with accepting their full selves.
And you can tell, like I always had this saying that language will always betray you. When you're trying to present yourself one way, like how you said, because I deal with language and linguistics and the like. So I can tell by your language and what you're using, whether you're about that or not, whatever it is that you're saying. And so, like of course, I'm an Africologist, I'm Afrocentric. So we would never identify our ancestors as slaves. We always use the term enslaved Africans because a slave is not, it's a condition. It is not an identity. So you can tell who has, read the literature, interrogated, the identity questions, because you wouldn't identify your ancestors as slaves. So, as a matter of fact, you wouldn't say, like, if somebody was to call your ancestors cotton pickers, that's what they did. But you would feel offended if you identified it, if someone was to use that as an identifier for them, right? And matter of fact, I'm gonna put this comment up here. It says, "Descendants of slavery is a designation of weakness and powerlessness." And for me, it also lacks creativity, because again, when I look at again, this is personal research. When I look at when Africans name themselves, is always in association with something powerful and divine. Absolutely. That's why I've made a suggestion for naming African Americans, and the word that I use is Nkole. Nkole means an eminent or powerful person, and it also is the name that they use for God in amongst the Baluba people in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And doing comparative linguistic work, this is the one of the older forms of the word that we know, dealing with ancient Egypt, as the word Netcher. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a process called palatalization. The K becomes ch, under a palatal vowel. And so they would say something like intor or inture. And you would find this in many West African languages simply as toro,
Mm-hmm.
right? It is and this is where you get this concept of divine king from in the ancient Egyptian literature, because the word for nature was also associated with the king, but it's not in the way that, of course, Europeans talk about it, but it just means somebody who has the power to make things happen, right? Um, and the abilities and the whatnot, and this is one of the titles, of course, that they use to reference um, divine forces in God itself. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, I didn't choose this name arbitrarily. I went and dug into African languages. I went and dug into the philosophy of African cultures, of African populations, and I extracted what was common, saying above them, so that, because they keep saying lineage, and they don't understand what it means to have that line of thought. And of course, I'm also juxtaposing this with studies, for example, like from Dr. Fukiao and Robert Ferris Thompson and others. I forgot the authors off the top of my head who wrote the Bantu heritage of the United States, for example. And how these Africanisms, Joseph E. Holloway's 2005 second edition text, in American culture, like how all this stuff survives in the culture, which they think, they just like the Greeks just appeared out of nowhere with all this energy and culture or whatnot, not understanding its African roots and the like. And so it's becoming like I'm just very sad that there was no effort put into it. Like there was just no deep study, no going into the literature and the heritage or anything to try to come up with something that was worthy, saying, of our ancestors, and just to reduce them to slaves. That's all they were. Like um it's disheartening, for me.
Mm. It's a sentence. It's almost a sentence. As I said, I deal with words too, right? In a different sense. So I listen to what you're saying, and I also can hear what you're not saying. The fact that, especially if you identify or you accept that is a way to identify your nationality, or here in America, it's saying I am a descendant of a slave or slaves. It's like who else identifies like that? First and foremost, and secondly, I think it's making a strong statement. It's saying, okay, so if you identify with a slave, what about everybody else before you? Like, what about everybody else before that enslavement process? What about, and I can, and I agree with my brother asarimhotep when he says, you know, we would say enslaved, but I'll even give you a pass. I'll give you a pass and say, well, maybe you haven't learned the nuance, because he's a linguist and all those type of things, so he's really good with words, and, he can pick words apart. But the fact is, even with that, you stopped with a slave. You didn't go any further. The fight that we thought our elders and babas and mamas and our ancestors from a scholarly perspective has fought, I think we thought we made more progress, brother Asar, and just come to find out that the war is still real. I think we thought that the fight was over in the 80s and 90s with Naim Akbar and Patricia Newton and Dr. Francis Cress Wells, and they say it's outdated. I say, look, we need to go back and gather that information and fight harder. We think that somehow, I don't know, pardon me, but I'm thinking like I'm supposed to accept this ideology over Amos Wilson. I'm supposed to accept this ideology over a Dr. Welson. I'm supposed to accept this ideology over a John Henry Clark. I'm supposed to accept this ideology over, and I'm not saying they were perfect, but what I am saying is I don't know where your scholars are. Because if you had real scholars, and they always beating up on other people, calling them miseducated. I'm talking about Ados specifically. Ados specifically is constantly talking about y'all ain't educated. I went to Howard, and then I went to UCLA and all this. Like, what? Who cares? But you're still not scholars. You know. Go ahead, brother.
How many Africana studies courses did you take while you were there? Does it have a program or a department? If you didn't have them, what is, like, you would always hear a doctor out of Howard, Dr. Craig. How I forget his name that fast? He would always talk about your lineage in terms of your education. Like, who was the person? Dr. Greg Carr. That's what I meant to say.
Mm-hmm.
Who was the person that taught the person you learned under? What's that unbroken chain and unbroken line of consciousness? What circles did they, roll in? What did they study in? So you always hear Dr. Clark talk about, Hubert Humphrey and others, um, and then of course Greg Carr, studying under John Henry Clark, and then there's going to be people under Dr. Greg Carr who learns who's going to build, and people who studied under Dr. Ben and et cetera, et cetera. Like, what is that unbroken chain of scholarship that you belong to? Because there's a school of thought that emerges in different ways. Like there's people who learn directly from Cheikh Anta Diop to Theophilo Benga to Dr. Raketi Amin, and for there's a chain that we can follow in terms of the ideology and ideas, but they don't have any such thing.
They do.
Right?
White supremacy. White supremacy ideology. I mean, I was looking at a video just yesterday, and I can't remember. And I looked a real quick search. Yvette Carnell was tied to some very interesting groups that were anti-immigrant, where she was like one of the board members and so on and so forth. And I'm just saying, like, it actually shows up, and people say they don't have any connections. It just happens to be that you were a part of and affiliated with people who are also affiliated with these anti-immigration type of organizations that were also deemed race hate groups at some point. So it's very interesting, and I haven't done a deep dive in that, but also I do want to correct. Nothing I said is changed by if the word means slavery or slave. Even note that I said I give you a pass if you didn't use a slave, but nothing I said changes if it's called American descendant of slave or slavery. It doesn't matter. It's still that's where you descended from. You skipped the everything before then. You know what I mean? So, and then you also deny and then you make Africans your enemies. Like you don't even let's say you looked at it in a more nuanced sense. Like, you make Africans your enemies. Like every African, even let's say there's people who sold us into enslavement or what have you. Yes, but does that mean everyone? Does that mean everybody? Go ahead, brother.
No, but that speaks to the contradictory nature of, because you're ready to dismiss, because first and foremost, there was no Africa in the minds of Africans at this time, and there's no collective consciousness in that manner. But besides that, okay, let's say that's true, right? But you still accept your own people when there's a whole bunch of us who done sold crack to our people, heroin, who pimp women, who kidnap them and bring them that's still slavery across state lines, um, who sold them opium and all kind of new drugs, in who murder, rob, and pillage. We have gangs in we got Crips and Bloods in every city and state. You ain't gave up. You supposed to get rid of if that's the logic, because they have done some harm to you and put you in a particular state. Then you also have to dismiss African Americans, foundational Black Americans, ADOS for the same thing. But then they're good. But then they'll say, "Well, it's not all of us." Well, it wasn't all the Africans either. And you know, it's not all the Africans have a particular worldview. So what? You find a few Africans who don't like African Americans.
Then you have to put that in context, exactly like you just said it. Like you just said it. You said that African Americans hurt other African Americans, and African Americans, whatever you want to call yourselves, have sold other FBAs and other ADOSers and all that type of thing, but you still stay connected to it and to them holistically because you're able to see the difference and the nuance. But think about it. It wasn't Africans, you know, for the sake of conversation, who sold you. In that case, it was Africans who sold other Africans. So if you ain't African, why are you upset?
Exactly. It's crazy. It's like, it's, you know, you also have to interject, you know, a basic course in logic, you know, for a lot of these arguments that these folks are making. And I'm pretty sure if the white man was not regulating the United States the way that they are, those same African Americans who are terrorizing African American communities would have sold y'all, if slavery was still going in a traditional sense. Matter of fact, you know, of course we know that, because with the exception of a few, we didn't even have slave societies. What was you going to get the slaves to do, you know, after you've captured them from war? So they'll sell them, you know, to people, but it becomes an economy and things of this nature. But they're using the same line that Biggie used in the beginning of the Juicy video. You know, he's talking about, shout out to, you know, this goes out to all the people who called the cops on me in front of my building when I was just trying to feed my family. Is that the excuse? So in order to feed your family, you guys to come to the detriment of my family? You got to sell crack and terrorize and shoot and make property values go down, et cetera. We can't conduct business because of the crime that you do, because you're trying to feed your family. Now, you know, it's you know, make it make sense and be consistent. And so, as you stated, there's nuance there, and everything has to be put into context. Absolutely. You know, just like all of these, the vast, probably 95% of African Americans have never taken an Africana Studies course. So they don't know the details of African and African American history in a way that someone like you or I would know. It's the same thing on the continent of Africa. Of course, they're not going to know the details of your history. They're still fighting colonialism just to basically learn their own history. Because France, Germany, and England still run the education system down there. So, you know, that should be a point of solidarity, because y'all both victims, y'all both traumatized by the same colonial forces that are using the same colonial tactics and having the same colonial effects on the minds of our people, whether they're on the continent, on the islands, or in here in the United States. And this is what's problematic, is the non-education part of it, and then of course the missing nuance that ties all this together, and not realizing that you actually have more in common than you think.
Absolutely. And I combat all frameworks that are anti-Black, anti-African, but more specifically anti-Black African unity. I don't
Mm,
care what they are. They can call themselves intersectionality. They can call
mm,
themselves black feminists. They can call themselves FBA. Look, I look at these things as frameworks. I mean, they definitely are frameworks. They can call themselves ADOS. They can call themselves whatever movement it is, even if it's such a far right wing or left wing of what you call being black power. Whereas you can't see through the smoke, you can't see through the trauma, it's a problem. You know,
mm,
so but I think the difference I want to say here is that you won't find in black or Pan Africanist frameworks where the majority of the people are anti-black or anti-African, but you will find in
mm,
ADOS and FBA where the majority of the people are those things. They're anti-African, anti-Pan African, and they think it's funny. I don't even. I think I don't. They
mm.
think it's funny. I don't understand. And then you will have to begin to ask some questions about the leadership of these movements. Although you say it's not a leader, and because I'm supposed to believe you that there's no leader because you said so, right? Because you said it's not a leader, and but this leader, this person, stands on the mic and tells you everything to do. And every time this person says a thing, I hear it in your echo chambers. He tells you not to debate. He tells people in Baltimore, the agents, and now everybody say, oh, they agents. Oh, he says that they're Hotep hustlers. Now everybody's saying Hotep hustler. Everything he says, you repeat, and I'm supposed to believe you that he's not your leader. Okay.
Exactly. And we can go on this all night, but I want to ask you one question. But I want to uh, open up the chat or whatnot to see if y'all have any specific questions for our guest before he goes. So I know there's going to be a time delay from me saying what I'm saying and y'all hearing it. So if you do have a question for Dr. Winkler, please put it in the chat and we will get to it. I will put it on the screen so that he can see. And so, okay, so we talked and complained and pontificated, but how can we is this solvable? What are some strategies that we can use to combat this? And I'm gonna use the phrase from Dr. Kaikosa Kajangu, which he calls this the syndrome of foolishness, right? What strategies can we or are in place or that needs to be developed to combat this? And if we don't nip this in the bud soon, what are the underlying implications for, you know, FBA, ADOS, pretendians running wild in, the African American community?
Mm. Yeah, I think we have to deal with this thing on various levels, various fronts. So I think and I'm going to speak from more of my framework, my understanding, and that's always through a historical, psychological, social, cultural, what have you type of understanding. And I also see things on multiple levels. There's being individual, familial, communal, societal, global. I think we have to confront this or engage this or intervene in this on all those fronts in a variety of ways. And one way I think that we have to deal with this is our mental health on a individual level. We have to deal with that. A lot of people who are susceptible to these things are very traumatized, or people who are operating out of a high state of anger. And it's difficult to parse it out at times because one of the major symptoms of traumatization is anger. And when you're flooded with that amount of those hormones going through your body, that anger brings about, you're not able to really think and see things clearly. So we need to deal with our individual selves on a psychological level. We do need to do that. We got to do all the other things, but we definitely say many times we haven't healed. We have to go and heal ourselves, whether that's with a psychotherapist, whether that's with a community group, whether that's a healing circle, whatever it is, we need to do these things, whether it's a book club. But I do think we have to deal with things on an emotional level as well. Sometimes our book clubs, we get stuck in the intellectual level, but we have to do what I say from an African-centered perspective, a both and approach. We have to deal with Dr. Amos Wilson talks about both hemispheres of the brain, because a lot of times we get real heavy on the right-hand side of our brain, and we just as stupid as we was before we started reading all the books, because we're black and white in our thinking, and we become very reactionary because we haven't yet dealt with those emotions. We have to learn to deal with those emotions that we have, as you said, repressed or suppressed, because if we have not dealt with that, our emotions will have us rather than us having them. So it will have its way with us. So we have to deal with that on a very individual level. We have to deal with that within our families. We have to deal with that on a community level. Because when you don't deal with these things, you're operating from a hyper state of arousal, a hyper state of alert, all or nothing thinking, them against us. You're coming from a very defensive, protective type of framework, which makes you susceptible to these type of things. So it makes us more susceptible to pseudoscientific theories, ideologies, frameworks, positions, social, political, whatever. It makes us just susceptible to things that are not realistic. So we have to heal on all the levels. And I think we have to, as people who are like us, I think we do have to become in real, like sometimes, and I had Brother Diallo and I spoke about this, maybe not everybody's going to have to deal with it the same way, but I think we have to fight these things because we love our brothers and sisters who identify themselves as FBA, because people with African-centered, Africological, or Pan-Africanist frameworks, sometimes what we do, we give too many passes to sick people because we love them. We want to heal them to death. But the problem is they get in the way. And I'm not saying, I'm saying we should love them, but the reality is we have to learn how to set real strong boundaries, and we need to call it out. Lots of times we think that in the mental health realm is like, well, let's not deal with diagnosis because we don't want to pathologize our people. No, we don't have to use the white man's diagnosis. But God damn it, since the time of ancient Kemet, there have been a lot of diagnosing, even if you want to, I call it, even if you just want to use two words, Mayat and Isfet. A lot of us are operating in chaos. And that is what FBA is. That is what ADOS is. That is what people are dealing with on a clinical level when they're not able to maintain themselves mentally, psychologically. They're out of balance. It can be because of the stresses of the world, or it could be something that's organic or biological. But we have to deal with it nonetheless. And we have to deal with that in the same way on all those levels, whether that is individually, whether that is familially, because most of those people who are out here in FBA and ADOS, I promise you, they struggle at home with their significant others because they don't have good, their communication skills are horrible. And that amount of anger that they have, you can't cut that on and off. It's evident. You can't be that angry. Again, going back to that internalized racism, which is miseducation, self-hatred, and anti-white sentiment. It creates that internalized racism is responsible for lots of hostility, anger, and the maintenance of trauma. So we have to deal with those things. Going to the community level, same thing. Societal level, same thing. I say we have to deal with, okay, we as Pan-Africanists or those who are similarly oriented, we have to really confront this with love, with boundaries, with limits, and we have to call it out and identify it. Lots of times we give too many passes. They are on the internet, and we need to work together. I'm saying even today, what you're doing and what I'm doing, many times we look past that and say, you know what, we got to do the real work. But we have to realize that social media is a real place in people's minds, and it is a real space where information is being transferred and it actually is impacting the minds of our people. We can't act like social media doesn't exist because most of our people are on it, and it is causing. I'm going to say causation, not correlation. Without the experiment, it is causal of, and it is. Let me say this. It is maintaining at best the trauma and exacerbating it, especially with the type of information that's out there. We have to do our best to combat that information. We know we won't be in the algorithms as much, but I think we have to do more of what you're doing. I come over here, you come over there. We do what we're doing together, because really, to be honest with you, they're linking up, but they're linking up because out of anger. We need to link up out of love, but I don't. That's just something I can leave.
No doubt. And it reminds me of the quote, how you do anything is how you do everything.
Absolutely.
So that
I like that.
that notion that if you're messing up here, we know that there's some turbulence in these other areas, because you need this particular skill set to navigate in
Absolutely.
these particular spaces. And if you don't have it here, more than likely you something's going on over here. But I thought I saw
let
two
me
questions.
jump on that real quick. In geo
Okay, go ahead.
theory, the theory and model and framework and philosophy that I've come up with and still working on, it says it very simply: relationships are relationships are relationships. Sometimes we think we do better in some relationships because the level of intimacy. If you're horrible at home, you're struggling at work, you're struggling at your job, you're struggling with your boss, you're struggling with your friends. Sometimes you can deal with those a little bit more because you know you can cut them off. But a lot of people learned during COVID they really wasn't good with relationships, and we need to do something about that.
Indeed. Well, I've put the question on the screen coming from BK Trainer 8814. First and foremost, thank you for joining the conversation. And he's asked the question: would you identify us as Black Americans? And by Black Americans, I mean descendants from from the people who've been here from over 15 generations.
15 generations. People calculate that differently, but what could you give me like I'm serious. I mean, what would it be easier for me? Maybe you can help me out with that, brother Ausar. Is what's the time? What's the time? I just want to be specific on when is the time marker you saying we began here?
Exactly, because like again, this is why you have to read the slave narratives as well. Like Africans were being brought here weekly, monthly, yearly, all the way into the 1800s. So some of your lineage may not have been here since the 1600s. They may have gotten here in 1830. You know, coming from Congo area, or like on my mother's lineage side, coming from Southeast Africa, right? From Mozambique, right? And so, but they're trying to, because it sounds like they're trying to make the argument that we've always been here.
Well,
right.
And looking
Go ahead.
it
I'm
up,
sorry.
and looking it up, if he agrees with this, I would say yes. If I'm following the question correctly, if 15 generations means 300 to 350 to 400 years, I could bang with that.
But here's another question I would raise.
Mm-hmm.
Like, think about that. Like, people keep forgetting that you have two parents,
Mm-hmm.
four grandparents, eight great great parents, 16,
Mm-hmm.
24,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you really believe that, when you get to the point of like 128 grandparents, that all of them were Native Americans, all the way down to you?
Are you saying, is he also saying that we never had any ancestry before then?
I'm I'm not sure what he's asking specifically, because
Okay.
he asked the question, are we Black Americans? Well, of course we can identify as Black,
Mm-hmm.
but I go off of what did our ancestors identify as.
Mm-hmm.
And in my scholarship, one of the things that I look for is when they created organizations,
Mm-hmm.
what did they name them? When we created churches, like when we created the AME, everybody like to say AME, but don't know what the A stands for. It's the African Methodist Episcopal Church.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
didn't say the Indian, the Arawak, this. They said the African Methodist Episcopal Church. When Prince Hall started the Freemasonry for the African Americans here, what was the first lodge called? It was the African Lodge.
They respond.
You know, um, so our ancestors already answered the question. And we have the organizations, the newspapers, the text to prove this. Not some random. My grandmother told me we was Indian.
Well, I'm just curious to, I think I can, as you said, we can identify as that, but I'm also curious, does he believe that our ancestry goes beyond that to the continent of Africa?
Well,
Because
yeah, that
I mean,
that's specific to him. I've heard other arguments that that we were the FBAs were the first people on this continent. Some
yeah,
even take it back to Pangea. You know,
right,
that
absolutely.
we know how problematic that is. But and then the quote unquote red Indians
Uh-huh,
came later.
uh-huh,
They're really the first invaders,
mm-hmm,
and then here comes the Europeans, and
mm-hmm,
then they're African slaves,
mm-hmm.
right? But I don't know if he's coming from that standpoint
Yeah, that's
or
why
not. So he
I'm
would have
curious.
to,
Yeah,
yeah.
because you have some people who also, interestingly, I think they're starting to see that they drew the line in the sand and said you can't really be FBA and also Pan Africanist. Some thought that you could say, "Well, no, I'm both," but they're like, "No,
Mm,
those Pan Africanists are trouble. They're the problem." So, like, now FBA gets to choose your political identity, and you're saying there's no ideology. So, yeah, it's I'd say there's a variant of strands of FBA. You have the Callawayism, you have the Callawaysism, you have the Nashidianism, you have the loveism, I call it. It's sincere loveism. You have the brother George. You have Maconism, your brother in Philly. You have a variety of strands, and I get that. I mean, they get to just make up anything because they say they don't have an ideology, but they have a multiplicity of ideologies. But the main ideology, I believe, is from the Nashidian strand. And I'm speaking like
Definitely.
this, and I'm not, and it might sound like I'm being like smart. No, but I think we like if I'm being like facetious, but I really think we need to categorize these things as such because that's how you do it in scholarship. You look, you have the Nashidian strand, the Callaway, all these different strands of the ideology.
Okay,
And
this
then
is gonna be
Callaway
the
said he's the
okay.
far right. He said he's the far right. He said he's the far right strand of FBAism. And hell no, we never been no Africans.
See, yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's inconsistent and it's scattered. But I'm gonna have this be the last question. But before I do that, I want to thank BK Trainer 8814 for his super chat. And thank you for engaging. Hopefully, you're here and you can put your uh, response to the questions directed to you, in the chat or even in the comment section, and we can come back and visit. But now I done lost the question that I originally had. It was about 42 tries. He was basically asking, um, do you, do you see a problem with lineage based? Here we go. I'm sorry. He said, I have one question. Are you in favor of lineage based reparations?
Okay, I assume what he's asking is people having being repaired as it relates to their nationality or their positionality as it relates to being enslaved in different places. I mean, is that what he's asking? Something like that?
Um, Again, I don't know. It wasn't that detailed. So what you saw is what I got. So and I'm pretty sure he's probably expanding in the chat somewhere. Um,
Okay.
but because I guess this is he's trying to keep it on line with the ADOS and the reparations argument,
So let me
which we
say,
could.
I'll
I'm
answer the
sorry. Go ahead.
question. I'll answer the question. Like, I'm not against anything if it, like, that's not my background right there. Like,
Uh-huh.
I've heard a variety of reasons why that is strong and a variety of reasons why it's not. I've also heard false claims about how CARICOM and all that will be handled and so on and so forth, which it doesn't seem very consistent from what research I've done, even with CARICOM, because you would actually benefit from what I've seen if you were to become you were to move to like Jamaica or somewhere like that. You would benefit from it the way that it's kind of sorted out. But I'm not against anything if that was just it and it was beneficial to the whole and it was the best way to move. But I don't think that that's that it doesn't stop there. What I'm against is the vitriolic, anti-African, anti-Pan-African approach. So if that is what it takes to get it, nah, I'm against it. But so if you have to sever yourself, if you feel like you have to sever yourself in all ties and be anti-African and anti-Pan-Africanist, I would say I'm not for it. But if that was what it was, and you could also speak about collective unity, continental, diasporic, global unity for African people, and I'm not saying every African person. I'm saying those who identify and also want to move in that political ideological framework. So I guess that's the way I'm going to answer that.
All righty. Well, I I said I was going to keep this to about an hour and 15 minutes. So we're approaching 2 hours now. So I've kidnapped him, uh, Dr. Winkler, a little bit past, my intended uh, time. So I do apologize for
Oh no,
that.
we good.
But um, it's a Friday night. This is family time, and we could be here all night.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The
Yeah,
restaurant for you is family time. For me, we closing up
yeah.
the rest. We closing up the restaurant.
See,
See, these Pan
you know what
Africans got restaurants and things going on. You know what I mean?
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and which would be, one of the arguments that I hear quickly is that, Pan Africanism hasn't done nothing and hasn't created anything. And here
Mm-hmm.
you are, a Pan Africanist, sitting in your own restaurant, with your own movement and various different things going on at the same time. And this is a sign of Pan Africanism, saying working. And what gets me is like, why would you create this rift, especially if your people, and I'm talking about African Americans, us, we don't even make toothpicks, but the Africans are sitting on all the minerals and
Mm-hmm.
things, and it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be the wave of the future. So while you try to be anti-African, all the white people and stuff are moving to Africa,
Mm-hmm.
trying to get in close proximity to Africans and the the rich minerals and things of this nature, and things are expanding, in Africa. And so, like, this is the perfect time for you to strengthen those bonds, so that we have a highway of relationships, which you can build goods and services and create markets
Mm-hmm.
centered on, based on your Africanness, because that's exactly what Europeans do. They consolidate on their Europeanness, and then go around the world and create markets and sell nothing but European products, and tell everybody else that y'all stuff is inferior, right?
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's Arabs and Islam, they come over, take over the religion. Then now you got to buy all the Qurans from them, all the hijabs, all the oils, et cetera, et cetera. They're selling their culture. And I'm seeing in Africa right now,
Mm-hmm.
Shaolin martial arts temples, right? That's in the style that's in China. They're wearing, you see Africans, they're learning Kung Fu, but
Mm-hmm.
they're wearing Chinese garbs, and they're learning Chinese languages and things of this nature. And so there's a lot that needs to be done even on the continent itself. But, it is the only way forward is Pan-Africanism and African centeredness. Otherwise, we're going to be relegated to second class, a permanent underclass, as
Absolutely.
um, what's his
You
name?
use that.
I think of his name.
You
I think
use
yeah,
that.
like,
You use that when they gonna come for you. Because that's who they use.
right
That's who they use as the one of the founders of the term. Although he never said it. I mean, if you
yeah,
want me to tell you, remind you, I will.
yeah,
Well,
Powernomics, yeah.
Dr. Claude Anderson.
Yeah, that's his
Yeah,
name.
yeah,
So,
yeah. That's who they misuse, and
yeah,
and and, and,
it's
and I think with that
go ahead.
though, you were saying, I do think that's kind of like their position. Either they forgot the political education of maybe like a Africana studies or any other political science, that somehow that you're going, like, this is like revolution or political 101, like in a real sense. Like, you believe that your oppressor is going to give you reparations to do what? And I'm not
Exactly.
saying not to get reparations, but I'm saying, do you really think that that is the power move? You think that they will give you enough to overthrow them? You think you really believe in this this thing that they call not equality? What's the other one called? um dag, I can't think of the term. It's always in the multicultural classes. I teach it, but I can't think of the equity. So
Okay.
you really believe in equity. Now, you believe that that's going to happen. You believe that they're going to put themselves out of business. You believe that they're going to give you something to give them a one up on them. And you believe that somehow you're going to do this and they're going to let you do it. Like, you think
After just taking DEI from you.
no structure.
They won't even give you DEI, let alone reparations. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Absolutely. No structural change is needed anymore. Just give me reparations. So you'll rather set out your global family for some crumbs that will never liberate you. I'm not saying don't give me my money. But what I am saying is that ain't going to free you, liberate you, or bring about African sovereignty. I think we have to go back into really studying some real thinkers. And I think I'll throw one out there is Dr. Marimba Ani. I think we really need to start thinking of some real thinkers. Maybe put these brothers down a little bit. Yeah, pick up Mama Remember I Need. Maybe that'll help you out. Pick up Dr. I had to throw Dr. Amos Wilson back up in there. To pick up some Dr. Carr. I'm going to even say pick up some leftist thinking African, Pan-Africans, revolutionary nationalists, revolutionary internationalists. All those, pick them all up. And you'll see what it takes to bring about revolution. And
Yeah. See, now this is another conversation for another day. But I tie all this drama that we're having. Of course, white mediocrity labeled white supremacy,
mm-hmm.
uh, anti-intellectualism across the country, and then the increasing inability to read past the 6th and 8th grade level, which is contributing to all this drama and misinformation that we are dealing with today. But
It's like
again, that'll take us
it's like a double
in another round.
and it's like a
I'm sorry. Go
double-edged
ahead.
sword. It's like a double-edged
Yeah.
sword because you get the education, you become stupid. Because then you have to de-educate yourself in a sense, like, well, you have to kind of like sift through that, and then you don't get the education, and then you're stupid. So either way, it's like they set you up both ways. Like, because I'm fighting in academia every day, intersectionists, and I'm fighting for African unity, but they want to talk about who's more oppressed. And that, in fact, to me, this is a variation of the same argument that our sisters and brothers are having in the manosphere and in the feminist movement. And I'm saying I don't care if it's black feminism, whatever. At the core, is pointing fingers at one another. That's not going to give you any liberation
at all.
I'll give you for our sisters. Look, I know you think I'm taking away. Study the Africana womanists. Study the Clear No Hudson Weems. Study the Nah Dove. Study those folks. I'm not saying that you can't. Women don't have their own struggle. This is things, but we all have our own struggles. I say to the brothers and sisters, study the Africana womanists and also study the Tahami Carriers of the world.
I would also add, study indigenous wisdom traditions. Study indigenous cultures. Like, like I heard Dr. Malana Karenga say some years ago that we tend to use Africa as a reference and not as a resource. And you want to say that black people were the first on the planet and stuff, but what does that really mean? That means we have hundreds of thousands of years of accumulated problem-solving strategies and solutions. And it would be wise, since Africans created marriage and relationships, to interrogate those indigenous cultures and how they approach that. You need to read Sabon Fusome's The Spirit of Intimacy, right? And learn from the Dagara people in Burkina Faso, who I mentioned, earlier, about indigenous ways of knowing and being in relationship, and being in relationship with a partner, and y'all are both walking towards a similar or the same purpose. Like, what does that mean? Like a lot of these manosphere and womenosphere, if I can make up that term, conversations are, fruitless because they're not grounded in their own heritage, and using Africa, for example, as a resource and not just simply a reference. That meaning a reference meaning we come from Africa, but you don't interrogate and look to Africa for problems to solutions, because you don't value African people. You think that they're less than, you or something to this nature,
Right.
But again,
we put everything before. We'll go to Buddhism, we'll go to Hinduism, we'll go to every other ism before we go to Africanism, or Ifa. Like, and I'm still saying use both sides of your brain even when you go over there.
Yeah. Indeed. Well, I do appreciate you taking the time to answer our audience questions, answer my questions, and to share your insight. And I just want to share the link to the Temple of New African Thought website. It's on the screen. Why does it? I'm sorry, they got some new features here, so it doesn't stay up long. So I see that it has 10 seconds. on here. So that's so I'll fix that later. But if you want to continue the conversation and get in contact with Dr. Winkler, he has a social media presence as well, and according to on all platforms, uh, all the major platforms, social media platforms, you should find them at Dr. Dr. Dot Dennis Ausar with the U in the Ausar uh, Winkler, and you know, I'm pretty sure that he's busy, but he'll find a time to converse and interchange with you. And matter of fact, y'all can just head on down to Baltimore and visit the restaurant and get some good food and whatnot. So where the name of the restaurant and where they can find it for those who are unfamiliar.
Diasporan, get it? Diasporan, soul, Jamaican and American fusion. And that you can find at 5525 Harford Road, Baltimore, Maryland, 21214. We open every day, not every day, Sundays through, Tuesdays through Saturdays. And we got all types of things going on. Yeah, go follow us on Instagram as well at the Temple of New African Thought, Diaspora and Soul. Dr. Dennis Ausar Winkler, as my dear brother shared. And let's have these dialectical conversations so that we can heal our community. Yes.
Indeed. Well, I appreciate each and every one of you in the chat who are listening live. Then, of course, all of you who are catching the archives, and those of you who are watching on my other live feed going through Facebook on the SR and the Harold Johnson page. Thank you all for joining the conversation. Until next time, which I don't know when it's going to be because, I'm going back into hiding. Matter of fact, for those who don't know, I'm doing some translation work for Dr. Mubabinge Bololo, a prominent theologian and Egyptologist just out of the Congo. I'm part of that lineage from, Dr. Bilolo to Shekant Diop directly and Theophilo Biga. And, so there's a whole school of African thought and philosophy that's in French and German. And, I'm trying my best to translate some of that to English. So I'll keep everyone updated with that. So y'all know where to find me. And until next time, Hotep. Peace.
Blessings, blessings.
What's up? Feeling like I dropped the draw for and caught Uno. Came to kick the door with the game man judo. Pin game low, that's why they give me kudos. Inspired by the 3-0. 595, check it for pack light. Hit the turnpike, slide to a baseline. Gotta sound like I just hit the 85. Oh, I'm so ready, by enemies necessary. We gon' be legendary, hold up. About to grow the payrolls. If you see the vision and you're with it, you should say so. Cause we about building, elevating the millions.
This program was created with the love and support of all our Patreon members and subscribers. If you are not a member yet and would like to see more content like this, consider becoming a member today. The link is in the description of this video. Your support is greatly appreciated.